Standing next to me here is Teresa Elsey. She's here to moderate the panel on encouraging grassroots innovation at legacy publishers. Teresa is a digital managing editor in the trade division at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. She directs a group that produces and updates more than 1,000 ebooks yearly, including adult fiction and nonfiction, YA titles, picture books, and e-only projects. Please join me in welcoming Teresa.
So first we have Erin Mallory. Erin's been working in design and production for over 14 years. She works with books, magazines, and newspapers, and started working with ebooks in 2007. In her current role as director cross media at House of Anansi Press, Erin oversees production of both print books and ebooks. She's spoken about ebooks and the state of digital publishing at various publishing conferences, and has conducted several webinars and workshops on ebook best practices. Next to her, we have Meghan MacDonald. Meghan is the Director of Digital Product Development and Consumer Insights at Penguin Random House Canada. She has many years of experience launching new products like Hazlitt and penguinrandomhouse.ca. Most recently, she's taken on the challenge of building a consumer insights team and opening a store. Next, we have Ana Maria Allessi. Ana Maria joined HarperCollins in 2001 and is currently Vice President of Digital Innovation and Publisher at Harper Audio. She oversees the publication of more than 500 unabridged audiobooks a year and is host of the podcast Harper Audio Presents, a weekly exchange of ideas with leading authors and book editors. Ana Maria also works with their Chief Digital Officer, supporting global digital innovation for HarperCollins authors. And last, we have well-known Laura Brady. Laura is an ebook developer and the principal of Brady Type. She consults on workflow, tools, specifications, and production best practices. She's also one of the committee members responsible for planning ebook craft and can often be found tweeting about e-production. But so our subject today is innovation. And it's also why innovation in publishing in a conservative industry might work a little differently than the rhetoric that we normally hear about innovation. And to start with a little housekeeping with a note on terms, when I say things like a legacy publisher or a large publisher, I just mean a place where you encounter some organizational inertia, a place where you don't necessarily have the power just to change things because you want to. And maybe a place where innovation is a buzzword, but the way to build that into the daily culture of your group is not so obvious. And when I say grassroots innovation, though we have some very high-powered people here today, what I'm interested in talking about is how that innovation can come from the bottom, what you can do when you're not the person in power in the situation, how you can influence your own work or just your small corner of the company. And also what I mean by grassroots is that my goal today is that we be very concrete and very tactical. So on our part, on the panel, we're going to try really hard to be really down to earth and not just give you vague, inspiring innovation conference speak. And I hope on your part that you'll all try to leave with one simple, actionable idea you can take back to your office and something you can do on Monday, something you can write on a Post-it note. And so if we could just take a minute, I want to talk to you guys first and find out who's here today. So show of hands, who considers that they come from a large publisher or a large organization?
Don't be ashamed.
It's okay. How about a medium-sized organization? Small organization? And none of the above? Do we have freelancers, sole proprietors, students out there? Okay, good to see. And who feels like they have fairly broad latitude to make changes where they work? Okay, a good number. And who has, some amount of latitude to make changes? And who has to jump through hoops just to get $40 for a subscription to Flight Deck or to install a free piece of software on their computer? Okay, you guys are my people. Good to see you. Who feels like it's part of their job or part of their company's strategy for them to be innovating? Okay. And of course, you probably find some obstacles to that. So who finds that having the time to do that is an obstacle? What about encountering resistance from your bosses or from your coworkers? How about having resources or tools set up that would allow you to innovate? And how about finding time to keep up with the industry, to invest in your own learning and the development of your team? Probably none, because you're all here today, but I know some people have that. So great, more to come on those. I think these guys are going to really talk about some solutions that fit with those kinds of problems. But first, for a quick 5 minutes, I was asked to show you just a handful of innovations that we've done in my group at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, just to give you some concrete examples to start with, where the examples are not really the important part, but some of the lessons learned and some of the ideas that I hope can grow for you out of some of the stuff we've done. So my first is what we call Amazon Rework Hour, and this is a very simple one. You can laugh at me later for coming to an innovation conference to tell you about Google spreadsheets, but I'm just throwing this in there to underscore that anyone can innovate point. And to some of you, this document may look familiar. This is the Amazon Rework list. It's a list of ebook titles that Amazon has determined may contain errors and that they want us to fix and resubmit. And for most of my time at Houghton Mifflin, we had about 200 titles on this list. And it's my group's responsibility to deal with this list, but it's always a little less urgent than doing the day-to-day work. And the work itself to get titles off this list is pretty tedious and annoying. So every week I would email the spreadsheet to my team, and I would talk to them about how it's really important to get titles off this list. Our relationship to Amazon depends on getting these titles off. And I would ask them to chip away at it as they had time, and essentially we made no progress on it. Same number of titles stayed on this list every single week. So about a year ago, I instituted what we call Amazon Rework Hour, where I invited my group to a weekly hour-long meeting. And the meeting is that we just all sit at our desks and work on titles from the rework list. And I copied the Amazon spreadsheet to a Google Doc, which let us work on it collaboratively and highlight the titles we were working on and cross them off as we finished them. And I invited everyone to a group chat so we could complain about how it was super annoying to work on this list, but also ask each other questions and have a little bit of social time in our extremely introverted, sitting alone at our desks kind of way. And this has actually been incredibly successful. As of this month, we have so few titles on the list that we don't even need this hour every week, but now I'm loath to cancel it because I can make them work on all kinds of stuff during this hour that they now have set aside to work on projects every week. So what I would draw from this is, first, stop doing things that don't work, even if they seem like they should work. Like, you should be able to spread the spreadsheet to people who work for you, and it's their job to take titles off the spreadsheet. But if it doesn't work, try something else. Schedule something. I find people really respect commitments that are in their calendar, so even if it's not something that seems like a real meeting, if you put a meeting on their calendar, they'll do what you say during that time. Or you can be for yourself, that you will probably do what your calendar says when you don't do what your to-do list or your vague idea of what you should be doing to innovate tells you to do. Enable others' efforts, and that can be as simple as making a Google spreadsheet, moving something from one corner of a server where it's not accessible to a place where everyone can work on it. And keep your day job is how I describe the sort of innovation I do, that I can't start from the top of the company's digital strategy, but I can make a lot of changes in what I'm responsible for and what the work that I do every day. And I think that's an easy place to start changing the way that you work. Oh, and also this year, we're adding 5 minutes of desk yoga to the beginning of Rework Hour, and I'm not really sure what innovation that points to, but just FYI, we're getting good at eagle arms. A second project we've done is building an ebook making tool. So about 2 years ago, it became apparent to us that the main tool we were using to build ebooks needed to be replaced. Parts of it had been built over a long period. We had a sort of unreliable programmer working on it who was doing a slow fade on us, and it had a lot of layers and dependencies, so even he couldn't make updates to it without breaking other functions that came as a surprise to us. So our production department led an effort to go out and look for vendors who had solutions for this that would take custom XML files and build them into EPUBs. And we sat through a lot of meetings and slide decks from large companies that do this sort of thing, and we spent a lot of time explaining our needs and sending them samples and wading through their marketing materials. And Iris, I'm sorry we didn't go with yours. Yeah, thanks. And we were getting quotes in about $100,000, maybe $200,000 range for this project. And at the same time that we were complaining about this to all the folks in eProduction that we work with, they convinced us the tool we needed was actually not that complicated. If it was them, they would build it themselves. And a coworker and I who were sitting in these meetings were also going home and telling our programmer husbands about this experience. And they were saying, if you're really about to spend $100,000 on that, let me know, because I'll do it for less. So we did go out to independent programmers and have them bid on it. And my group was able to get this project done for under $10,000. And so it was beneficial in terms of saving a lot of money for the company. But what was really beneficial about it for us is that we got to build this tool from the ground up. And instead of buying a finished solution, we were forced to understand every single bit of how our process worked and everything we needed to be built into that tool. My team was inclined to be a little superstitious about our old tool, about like what you could put in it and what would come out as a result. And so to test iterations of this new tool and to learn to write bugs for our programmer, to be very logical about when I put this in, this is what comes out, but this is what I expected to come out, really built their understanding of exactly how ebook making tools work and what we were doing. And that's made them a lot more proficient now in the present at customizing and building our ebooks because they totally understand what inputs to put in to get certain outputs out. And then when we finished this project, we wanted to show the rest of the company what we'd done and why, but we didn't want to explain to them the intricacies of why we have this kind of XML that needs to become then this kind of XML. So what I finally did was I made a split screen video that showed me making an ebook with the old tool on one side and an ebook with the new tool on the other side and a stopwatch in between to show that the old way took 3 minutes and the new way took 30 seconds. And I think that's probably the best I've ever done explaining to people in my company who are non-technical about what we do and why we need them to invest in new tools for us. So my lessons here were change the scale, that If you can't take on a project at the $100,000 level, maybe you can take it on at the $10,000 level. If you can't do 100 books, maybe you can do 10 books, or maybe you can do 1 book. That changing the size of a problem changes the kinds of tactics you can do to tackle the problem. And if you don't have the power to tackle the problem at the large size, you might get to be a lot more involved in it at the smaller size. Also, use your community. I got so much great advice from different people in the e-production world when we were going out to do this project, and so many different ideas about how they would approach it if it was their problem, which was not the standard view at my company. Develop your team along with your tools. If you're going to do an innovation project, bring your team along, because you're going to need them to be there when you get to the finish. And if they've seen all the steps along the way, all of a sudden they're smarter, as well as your tools being smarter. And then the last step is market your work, that once you've done an innovation, take the extra hour or half hour to find a compelling way to explain what you've done to the people in your company who may not be technical, who may not have completely followed along with why you're doing this project. One last thing for you. About a year ago, my company announced an internal hackathon, and it was framed as being open to the entire company, but it was really mostly for our developer groups. And I know this is true because you needed to log into the technology group wiki to sign up for it, which I didn't have. And all the group events were on a floor that we'd never been to, and they assigned us a team room to work on, but they didn't know that none of us have laptops, so we couldn't actually go there and work on our project. But my goal wasn't to win the hackathon, and it wasn't to demonstrate that we had coding skills that were like our developer groups. It was just first to get my team to start thinking of themselves as technical employees, just to convince them that they were allowed to be a part of this, even though the company structure was maybe not conducive to that. And what I wanted to do as a project was to build a website to show that my team that the HTML and CSS skills that they were using only inside of ebooks would be equally applicable in a context that would be more accessible and understandable to their friends and colleagues and families and everyone they work with. Because unfortunately, in an ebook, you can send someone an EPUB and they click on it and it doesn't open on their computer and they're like, well, moving on, or can you send me the PDF? Great. And I got to teach my team a bunch of things in the process of working on this. We got everyone using GitHub, making their own branches and using pull requests to the project, and we got them testing for responsiveness on mobile phones, and we got some good advice from our print designers about how to make our web page not look like it was straight out of 1998. And one of my employees, despite not knowing any JavaScript herself, got really impatient with waiting for me to fix something and went ahead and did it herself. And my second goal was to market our group as a technical group, because we have a lot of problems with being embedded in an editorial group where we have technology needs that our bosses aren't accustomed to, or that we can't pay technical salaries. So we just wanted our division to see the kind of work that we can do, again, in a way that would be really easily accessible to them. And I think this may have actually worked a little bit too well, because our corporate communications group was making a video during the hackathon, and they got a little footage of me. There's a picture of me typing at my computer that they now use every time they need a stock image of women coding. But what we built was an ebook discovery website where you could filter books by different criteria, and then you could click them to get more information about them and a buy link. And just to be clear, this is very naively done. It is not at all updatable. It is not drawing from a database. And I thought just the experience of building this was as far as the project would go. But as a coda, recently my boss's boss was looped into a completely different conversation about how our K-12 sales staff is having trouble getting information about trade books. And she was able to say, hey, you should actually look at this thing that our ebook group built. And so the idea behind our little project was able to be applied to a totally different problem elsewhere in the company. And my lessons here are just to use your skills in a new way, to take risks in a safe environment. If anyone ever invites you to participate in a hackathon, totally do it. Make a tangible sample or proof of concept. And I think this is really important when we're doing digital work, because we can describe our ideas to people, but a lot of people don't totally understand what it is that we're doing and won't go the extra step to download the EPUB and the right software to read it, or go through the steps to get to where you are. So if you can show them something that represents the work you can do or the work that you want to do, I think that's really important. And then along the lines of keep your day job, if you can support your boss's goals or your organization's goals along the lines of the innovation that you want to do, I find it's a lot easier to get support for it. So that's all I have for you. I want to shift over now to our panel, who has a lot of their own great innovations to talk about. And in talking with them, there were some sort of common themes that emerged in their solutions, some themes that I think kind of nicely mesh with the concerns about innovation that we talked about. So I'm going to frame my questions to them around those, and we'll save some time at the end so you guys can ask them some questions too. So the first theme I kind of pulled out is making purposeful change, because what I heard a lot from these guys is that innovation just for the sake of innovation doesn't work. It needs to be aligned with actual problems or actual needs in your business. So I think I'm going to start with Megan, who talked to me a little bit about how you manage innovation in your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. There we go. So one of the things I find really valuable with my team is making sure we're being transparent with each other, and then doing my part to bring the overall company's goals into my team so everyone understands what we're trying to do as a business, and then potentially translating that so then when we have ideas, we know that, do these align with what our overall goals are? If yes, okay, we can bring those to other people as well. And I think just making it clear to everyone that it's okay to try something and have it not work, and make that part of our culture within a team, and knowing that it's not actually failure, it's just learning and moving on from there and experimenting as we go. I find that's really, really important for us.
Great. And Ana Maria talked to me a little bit about being part of a service group, which I think is true for a lot of us, that we provide services to other parts of the company, and how innovation works in that context.
Yeah, I do consider innovation to be, the work that we're doing to try and fail is a service. And I talk a lot about how I consider my job to be partially to be able to see around corners, and so to keep myself hopefully a little bit ahead of my colleagues, and then share that back with them and say, okay, this may apply to a problem that you're trying to solve. I feel that our company is fairly good at keeping front of mind our overall goals, and one of them is to be a very author-centric house. And so with that in mind, sort of every day, it's easy to sort of saddle up to somebody and say, hey, I saw this thing and it might work with this book that you're about to publish, and will your author be willing, and can we get on the phone with the agent and let's try it out. We've done it that way a number of times, where it's been just a sort of, a side of the road effort, and then once we've gotten something that we think is strong enough to be duplicated or interesting enough to be duplicated, then we broaden it out.
Great. Maybe I could ask all of you, I think a lot of you are managers or leaders in your organizations or in the groups that you work in, but what would you like to see your teams doing in terms of innovation? What would you encourage entry-level employees to do to be innovating in their work? Someone want to take that?
All right. I think one of the things you can do, no matter what your level within a company, is try to innovate with what you're already doing. So I think we think of innovation as these big, drastic, disruptive changes, but it can also be making something 10% better. Or looking at a process you've been given as part of your job and thinking, okay, you know what, I feel like this step here doesn't make sense. Maybe I can suggest a change there. And thinking of those small little things that you do every single day to improve a process or bring someone an idea is something that anyone can do, no matter what your level.
That's great. Erin, you were just talking to me about how innovation is embedded in what we do. Do you want to talk about that just for a second?
Sure. I think one of the things when we work in the digital field, especially people in digital publishing who've been here for a few years, we just kind of fell into it. We didn't know necessarily that we were going to become ebook people. And one of the things I need to do every day to keep up with my job is keep learning. And I realized that when we started talking, I often think of innovation as the big new thing. What am I going to invent from scratch that's going to revolutionize the business? And that scares me to no end. But what I realize is every single day when I read something in digital book world, or I look at the eProduction Twitter feed, or someone says, this broke in Kindle, do you know how to fix it? And someone else says, oh, I tried this and it worked. We're constantly innovating because ebooks are still constantly evolving. And to speak to your last question about how can we support younger people or newer people in the business, I was a one-person department for a long time, and I'm set in my ways and doing things and trying to think of new ways, but one of the things I think we can do with younger people in the industry is show them what you're doing, be open and transparent, like Megan was saying, and say, how should I do this differently? Rather than telling them, this is how I do it, you should do exactly the same thing, show it to them and say, how would you do this differently? And be open to whatever the feedback is.
And I don't...
also say, my experience with this is that the lower level people really have to kind of fight to get out of their traditional role that they're expected to do every day and sort of involve themselves more. I run a speaker series at HarperCollins where we get people from other industries to come in and talk and really try to motivate people. And it's really interesting how hard it is for people to show up for that 1 hour because they feel like they're chained to their desk. So I would actually recommend that you really be very vocal to everybody, like, you know, I want to do what I have to do, but don't be worried if I'm focusing a little bit on this other thing, you know, my other work is not going to drop off, because I really do worry that that's what's happening a lot at our company, that people don't feel it's legitimate if they're in a managing editorial role, if they have an idea that's completely, you know, unrelated and over here. I think we're getting better at that, but I think you do have to be kind of, I was going to say a crude word, but you just kind of have to be kind of articulate, let's put it that way.
Fair enough. And Laura, I want to talk to you about the e-production community a little later, but it occurred to me just as we were talking now that that's maybe a great way for people who don't have a lot of experience or are just new to the industry to get involved. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, people who work in who work hands-on in ebooks often refer to this Twitter hashtag called e-production. It's EPRDCTN. It's a really vital community of ebook developers around the world who often work in isolation from one another, who meet at that hashtag to collaborate and to complain a little bit. But it's super valuable. So on any given day, you can say, man, I am just trying to get this piece of CSS to work and it won't work. I did this last week, and a colleague in France whom I've never met in real life, he and I worked through and found a solution, and it's been extraordinarily valuable. So I use it frequently to find efficiencies. Like, so you guys, how are you building your page lists, say? How does this happen? And everybody's having trouble doing it, so then we think about ways to find an efficiency. I find that innovations in the space that I work in often, almost always, come from trying to find efficiencies to get things done more quickly. But in that particular case, none of us had a good solution, so I collaborated with a scripter and came up with one that took several hours of work and collapsed it into minutes, and it was awesome.
And what occurs to me, this is of course just anecdotal, but I do know people who find things on Twitter and then tell their bosses about them, and their bosses are very impressed about this new information that they're getting that is not available through perhaps the normal channels that their bosses are looking for information. So it's...
Yeah, everybody appreciates that. Seriously, you know, crowdsource your knowledge.
Yeah, I think there's so much research to be doing that anyone in the company who can bring new information to the table is really going to be welcomed on that. So I want to move a little to talking about creating space to experiment. How do you find the time and the resources to be doing innovation in your day? Erin, you talked to me a little bit about your one different thing on every list. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we have a kids list and an adult list, and we publish about 85 books a year, I think. And one of the things I started doing was when we have our pre-sales conference, our internal introduction to the new titles on the list, is I put my thinking cap on and I thought, okay, as I'm listening to the editors talk about what books are going to come up in the next year, I want to start thinking which one book from each list, the kids list and the adult list, is going to be interesting to try and do something new with, something we haven't done. And because our editors, you know, are working so far ahead of the game and they're working directly with the authors, and we have a small enough company that we all talk and collaborate, and I can go to them during the pre-sales conference or right after the pre-sales conference and say, okay, do you think this author would have anything interesting to add to a digital book, or can we think about doing anything different now so we can get it in early in the editorial process and make it easier to get it out at the end when we're doing our digital book. And that helped me just this past year. We're just releasing a kid's book now called Super Duper Monster Viewer. And when I heard the initial concept of it at our pre-sales conference a year and a half ago, I flagged it as that's the one I would be super excited about. And we've just released our first animated kids book, which we haven't done before and I didn't know how to do. So that opened up a whole new opportunity for me to start innovating and for our author to get involved and for our sales and marketing to innovate a little bit. So that it helps me if I have a concrete approach to innovation rather than just thinking, whew, we have a book, a list of 85 books this year, let's be amazing with all of them. If I can chunk it down to smaller bits, that helps me parcel out the time a little bit.
And I really like the structure part of it, although maybe that's, again, what makes you forget that you're doing innovation in your job because you've done so well at building it into what you do. And Laura, you have a technique you're using with your publisher clients to make space for both you and them to be doing some innovation that I really liked.
Yeah, so the work I do is a little bit, I don't work at a legacy publisher. I'm a freelancer. I have a conversion house. I work with a number of people, and we do ebook conversions for a broad variety of publishers. Some publishers by accident, some more traditional publishers. And in an effort to kind of manage my clients' costs and also give myself space to be more creative, I have started to take on the entire ebook production for small publishers for a much smaller fee than if they were freelancing out all of those ebooks en masse. And so they pay me one fee for a year, and I take on their whole entire ebook production list. And it's kind of great in a number of ways. There's a solid chunk of money coming in for me, so then the financials are taken care of, and my husband doesn't complain. But also, then I have space. I don't have to worry about the nickels and dimes and how their invoice is going to maybe give them a small heart attack. None of that is going to happen, and I can take a title or two that I find interesting and then push back and say, let's do something more and different with this one. And I'm not keeping track of my time. They don't worry in any way about their costs. And it gives everyone space to think differently about the content because they're not thinking in the straight and narrow. They're not worried about costs. It's kind of great.
So fight capitalism continues to be the theme of this conference.
Pretty much, yeah.
But I think that's what those of us in-house do too, is that we have a large list and you can pull out one title to work on if you can average that cost across your large list. So that's, I think, something to think about for your innovation too. If you do it on a small part of your project, you can then spread the cost or spread the time over a larger set of products.
I think a key element is backing up the effort so that it goes back in parallel with that print book production, and the earlier you can start these conversations is really helpful. And I think that we have been successful in sort of at launch encouraging everyone who's listening to a launch to suggest ideas and approaches. And as often as it is a product innovation, it's a marketing innovation. I think that we're doing a lot of interesting things testing marketing that support just a traditional, print, and audio. So I think that that's as important, and I think you can think of innovation in that way just as much as the actual product innovation.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to comment on the space to experiment?
Yeah, I think just the idea of space itself is really important. One of the things, so I don't actually work on ebook production at all, so I don't have the same concept of working with a list and trying to pull things out, but one of the things I do with my team a lot is to think of it more as problems to be solved. So when we're thinking about one of our websites, maybe it's, okay, we want to solve the problem of how do we surface something to our audience in a different way? And so we actually will block off a full day and go and get a couple of people together and have more of a structured session around solving a problem. And I think creating that space where everyone is there to do that during that time is an important aspect of it, and you're working together towards something.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the obstacles I know a lot of people face is encountering resistance to their innovation. And so a thing I talked a lot about with these guys is what kind of support you have to do for your innovation. You do the work of the innovation itself, and then what's the work that goes along with that. So we talked a lot about what you do to educate others, what you do to market your work. Erin, you talked to me a little bit about what you thought the motivations for resisting innovation were.
Yeah, we're talking about legacy publishers here, and I think we've done everything the same way for a really long time, and we still talk about this ebook revolution, even though the revolution is so old now, it's kind of unnecessary, but I think it's still pushing us in places where we kind of don't necessarily want to go just because it's unfamiliar. And one of the things I found helpful in-house is talking about problems, not necessarily, that something is failing, but challenges you're encountering, and getting people on board with this is a challenge, there is a better way to do it, rather than trying to sell people on a solution that they don't know that they need. So we're implementing a new project management system right now, and one of the things I was a little bit worried about, we opened it up to the whole company just last week to start doing some needs analysis, and I was really pleasantly surprised by the excitement people were showing, because everyone, even though we hadn't talked about it with everyone at first, everyone was like, yes, that is a problem that we need to fix. And I'm so glad that we're finally talking about fixing it. So I think if you can get everyone on board with the idea that there is a challenge, there is a problem that you're facing, or a barrier of some kind, it makes it a lot easier to then start talking about the solution.
One of the things I say to my group a lot, which I think is an apocryphal Gandhi quotation, is first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. So if they're fighting you, if you're getting resistance, you're already at step 3. You're doing pretty well. Megan, you talked about this a little with me too. You called it getting the army behind you. How are you doing that?
Yeah, I think it's this is going to be one of those kind of loose recommendations, but I do a lot of what I call just like kitchen conversations, or talking to people in hallways and slowly talking to people about things I'm excited about that I'm working on right now, and hearing what they're excited about as well. And then you can also start talking about what their challenges are, and then thinking about, okay, can we help solve this in any way? But then this idea of getting an army behind is something we try to talk about a lot at my company, where if we're going to be launching something new and innovative, that can rarely be done with just the 2 or 3 people who actually worked on the thing. You then, to get it out to the world, you need other people behind you. So you need to start to get people in other departments who will get excited about it as well, and kind of rally their troops and bring them in. And it can be done in many ways. Like, part of it might just be sending out an email and talking to people, but it also is a lot of these like side conversations first, and then slowly bringing people together to do something.
Very good. Ana Maria and Laura, can I bring you in on what you're doing to educate people about what you're doing? Or?
Well, I think this all backs up to trust, as you heard earlier, it's sort of the first step. I've been working on ebooks since 2005, and I've been at HarperCollins the entire time. And it's gotten so much better, but initially people were really worried that they didn't know enough, that they weren't smart enough to talk and engage with the pace of change. And so we spent a lot of time standing up and using terminology to familiarize them with that. And you also learn that people have to hear things, 3 or 4 times before they really get it. Because I had done X number of presentations, and I was riding home on the train one day with an associate publisher, and she turned to me and she said, I know I should know this, but can you just tell me again, what does DRM mean? I mean, this was 2005, and I thought to myself, okay, that's really helpful to know that she's doing something, she's so talented at what she's doing, and I respect that so much. And if she knows I respect that, and she knows I'm here, again, going back to service, to help her expand that readership, then they're all in. As long as they know this is all in service of increased discovery and increased readership, then you don't get resistance. But they have to trust that that's truly what you're doing, and you're not just some goofball that's trying to get attention for some weird thing that you're trying to do.
My relationship to the publishing process is just a little bit different, but I find that if I can show people efficiencies and how they will affect their bottom line in really direct ways, that forces change pretty dramatically.
And you're not afraid of the stick as well as the carrot. I hear that you charge for messy InDesign files.
Well, so I often get source files where they're just not using the tools in an efficient way. They're not maximizing how they're using it. Maybe they don't know how. And so I do spend some time in education in service of long-term relationships or whatever, but I do help them understand how they can make this easier by using things well, which is kind of step 1, but I'm doing step 1 over and over and over again through my career with these clients. But that's okay, because then, so if they send me files that are a mess, I have to charge them to fix those. I have to pay someone to clean it up, and then they see that really directly. So if I can show them that it will cost them less, change happens.
And I think that's along what we were talking about before, is showing people what the problem is and then giving them the solution, not imposing the solution before they understand the problem. And don't let Laura undersell herself. She was telling me, I do a little bit of education, and it turns out she travels all over the place teaching everybody about ebooks. So get her if you need her at your organization. Another thing I think we've talked about that's kind of related to this is setting yourself up and setting other people up to be successful. So Ana Maria talked to me a little bit about what comes after innovation. Like, what do you need to have in place once you've made one change?
I think that this industry does not suffer from a lack of ideas in any way, shape, or form. But what we struggle with is process. And I don't use the word process. I always think in the terms of assembly line. It starts here and it goes through this and then it spits out. And it's really hard to line up a different assembly line within a legacy publisher when that first and primary assembly line is so predominant. And so you have to find the people who know how to do it, who are interested in the stages and all of that. So I'm often thinking, as we're doing something once, oh dear, you know, if it's popular and people want to do it, like how are we going to do this 6, 8, 10, you know, or 100 times a year? And I think that that's a really big challenge at a publisher like HarperCollins, because we're really lean in terms of resources, and that's the primary challenge, I think.
Laura, I'm going to ask you about the e-production community again, just because it's been so important to me. It's what brought me into this world and has me up on the stage. So if you can talk about how that's, you know, setting up the entire industry for change, I think, in a very grassroots way, from the bottom up.
Yeah, so I was actually talking to someone about Twitter yesterday. There were several people who came to eBook Craft in the last 2 days who I never met in real life, but who the connections came via Twitter. If Twitter ever becomes less popular or somehow closes down, I'm dead. It's my favorite colleague, no question.
You guys are all tweeting out there, right?
But the e-production hashtag in particular is kind of great. And there are sort of ebbs and flows on how much people use it. So maybe about a year ago, I decided to corral that and to start a Google Doc and to gently pressure people into taking on a leadership role and to signing up for, there's a regular chat at 11 a.m. on Wednesday Eastern Standard Time where people come together and chat on a regular basis. And I made this Google Doc and had people sign up for topics or to offer to lead a conversation. And that actually really drove people thinking about what's the next thing we need to talk about, or what's the next problem we need to solve, and how can I contribute to that. So uptick on that was fantastic. Like the first 6 months were filled in without much effort or convincing. It's since dropped off a little, but it's still very dynamic. And that was like that was a super easy thing to do. Let's just create a Google Doc, tweet out the link, and see what happens. And that Google Doc got populated before I knew what happened. It was easy and it was great. And now it's a not to be missed event every Wednesday for someone like me, especially who works a little bit in isolation, but for lots of people as well.
Yeah, I think you also talked to me a little bit about the function of the community, that it's so important to have this place where people commiserate, where they...
Yeah, it feels really significant to have a place where you can take a really obscure complaint about the way KF8 gets crunched, for example, and have everyone go, oh my God, I know. So it is about community and collaboration and commiseration. There's lots of complaining that goes on, but that's okay because it's a really safe place to do it. Not that it would be unsafe otherwise, but people understand.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's important, that it's a safe space. Again, creating a space to experiment, a space to say. Dumb question amnesty is my favorite topic on e-production.
About every 6 weeks we have a whole session that's called a dumb question amnesty. And that means you can bring any ebook question to the table and people, and you get really full answers from people who maybe helped write the spec. It's great.
People are really, really kind about how ignorant you are on Twitter. I think that's the only place where that happens. And now Laura and I have both revealed how we are innovating and publishing one Google Doc at a time.
It works.
And then maybe as a last topic, we talk about self-investment and development. So I want to ask all of you to maybe comment on what are you doing for your personal development? What are you making sure that you keep growing, investing in your own learning? Shall we run down the line? Does anyone want to start?
Ebook Craft.
That was my answer.
Sorry.
I read a lot. I read both things that are going to keep me up on innovation, and I read my colleagues' acquisitions. And I think that that's a very important thing, because what I'm starting to see in our business is that we're hiring people that are experts from other industries, which is really very helpful, but they're not readers. And that there's a certain amount of tension that has arisen from that. And I love to read, so I read their books, and I read industry stuff, and I listen to crazy podcasts, and I ask questions.
Yeah, I guess mine's kind of similar. Like, listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot, but one of the things I try to do is always look outside of the publishing industry as well. So I always read Harvard Business Review because I think it's a great look at what other industries are doing, just kind of across any the whole spectrum. And then I try to take courses or go to meetup groups and things like that. I find Toronto at least has a really great scene for just these really casual nights where anyone can show up and you can hear someone talk about a project they're working on, or someone who really knows a lot about some programming language, and you can learn a little bit from them and talk to people and ask questions. And it's a really open community for that, and I find it super helpful as a zero cost entry into learning something new.
Yeah, I think one of the keys for me is getting out of my silo. I think it's very easy for me to just sit down at my desk every day and do my work, and I can, read the traditional blogs and hang out on e-production on Twitter, but I'm still just in my own head. And one of the keys for me, I think, is talking to people inside my company and, like you said, kitchen chat, casual conversations, where stuff comes up that you're not even planning, and that can lead you down a path. It can start you thinking a different way. And coming to stuff like this as an attendee, but also if you ever get a chance to present, even if it's just in your own department, you're going to sit around and talk for 5 minutes about something you did that day. I think it makes you think about what you're doing differently. And I think it's helpful, especially for younger people getting in. I think if you ever get the opportunity to go be a guest speaker at one of the publishing programs, or go to a meetup and do a 5-minute quick presentation or something, I think that really helps you think outside your own head a little bit more.
Do I need these guys to be more concrete? I'm going to ask them maybe if they can give specific examples of what they're reading, what podcasts they're listening to, stuff like that, what tools they're using, what systems they're using. I'm going to claim Google Docs as mine, but also the thing that I do is I subscribe to the Digital Book World daily email, which is not a very in-depth email. It's not very technical, but it just means that every single morning I have an email that I read that's the first thing when I get to work that has 5 or 10 articles about changes in the digital world. And if I find one that's interesting, I forward it to my group, and we have a discussion about it through the day as we have time. One little thing. What do you guys do?
Same. I subscribe to the Digital Book World daily newsletter. I read The Digital Reader is a blog, and Teleread is another blog predominantly about ebooks. Those are probably my 3 main references.
I'll talk about podcasts a little bit. So I listen to a ton of podcasts. I actually started because we launched our own podcast network, and I hadn't really been into it at that point, and then suddenly just dove head first. And some I really like around technology. One is Reply All, which is really, really great about the internet. I really like 99% Invisible, which is more about design. And then on more of the data front, which we haven't talked about much, but it's part of my job, I like one called What's the Point from 538, which is an online data journalism site.
I mean, we're all reading that type of stuff. I actually really like to rely on the New York Times because I think it's broad. I mean, I read all the minutia stuff, and one of the things that I read first, if you want to know about that, is I read this thing called Video Link, because I've been asked to sort of oversee the efforts around video at the company. So that I find that really useful, and that every single morning there's a change that I should be aware of and I should share with my colleagues. But I also really like to make sure that I'm reading something like the New York Times, and I still get it in print, and I take it on the train, and because it puts some of this stuff in context, and I find that really helpful.
I have several tiny newsletters that I subscribe to, and I find them really satisfying. People can do whatever they want in those and send out interesting news. Amy Greco in London has a great one that has lots of publishing related news in it, and Bjaldur Bjarnason has one as well, another London publishing person. And there's a Toronto woman named Stacey May Fowles who has one on baseball, books, and feminism. That's my favorite one. I know, exactly, right? Those are great. I find a lot of value in those. I find myself saving them and then savoring them, partly because they're really personal, but it's also really gratifying, and it's a way to think and to push how I'm thinking.
Those all sound great. Now I've got stuff to read on the plane. So we've got just about 10 minutes left, and I want to leave some time for audience questions. But before that, just to remind you of today's goal, which is that you're going to leave this session with one concrete idea written down that you're going to enact for innovation when you get back to your desk on Monday. So if you haven't done that, do that now, or think of your question that's going to help you do that. If you need a few more ideas, I wrote a guest blog post for BookNet Canada before this panel, which you can find via the shortened URL, or I'm sure by searching for it, that has just 10 more ideas of little things you could be doing for innovation. And if you want more accountability for what you're going to get done, feel free to send me a tweet telling me what you're going to do, and I will try to remember to pester you about that on Monday. But I think making the public claim that you're going to do something is also a great way to get it done, so feel free to do that. And now I'm going to give you back your panel for any questions that you have.
Thank you so much for that great panel. I'm Iris. I'm president of Book Builders of Boston and resident sketch note artist at this conference. I'm so happy to hear about the encouragement to reach out to younger people within your companies. So this is targeted more toward people in larger, more established publishers. Can you speak a little bit about mentorship and how you approach mentorship within your companies? Do you have a formal program, which I've heard is available in some places? How do you foster that, the opportunity for mentorship among your colleagues?
So HarperCollins doesn't have an official mentorship program, although that's a very good idea. But my approach has been inclusion. So whether it's listening on the phone when I'm negotiating with an agent, I was a literary agent, and that's the way I learned. I would always be on the phone silently when my boss was negotiating, so I've carried that over. I take people to meetings with me. I sit them down and I go through the P&L and I make sure that they understand everything, and it's really, it's more that effort, and I really enjoy it. And then I say, okay, a year from now, try to soak everything up, and then a year from now, tell me where you really want to go, because it's very often the way that they get in is not where they want to stay, and then I will make a concerted effort to get you where you want to go. So wherever it is that you think you want to go, I will try to find people to get you there.
When I was leaving O'Reilly Media, the president, Laura Baldwin, reached out to me and said to me, your success as a manager is going to be measured by the success of your people. And I've taken that really seriously, that what my role is as a manager is to enable and develop the people who work for me. And so there are a lot of ways we do that. I have weekly meetings with them. I talk about their goals regularly. But I just take it really seriously that that's my primary role, is to serve the people who work for me. And so maybe those of you who are managers out there could write a second Post-it note, and that'll be the thing that you're taking back to your employees to help them innovate and develop in their jobs.
Yeah, and at Penguin Random House, we also don't have a formal mentorship program in Canada, but I've tried to, I guess, create one within my own team, and so we have participated with Ryerson University on their Mills mentorship program for a few years, and so that means one student working with us for about 3 months at a time, and whether through that program or if we have a more traditional internship program through another school, one of the things I always try to do with younger people working on my team is make sure that the work they're doing is project-based, so they develop all of the skills necessary to get something out into the world. So they have to do a presentation to some senior member of a company. They have to be able to write a one-pager describing what their work is. They have to be able to create a PowerPoint to actually present it and do the research and develop a scope document. And so I just generally don't believe in busy work for anyone on my team. Everyone has to be doing something productive, even if they're just learning, and that's okay. And then something else we're trying now in the Canadian office that is like a month old, and I don't know if it's going to work yet, but we're hoping it will, is breaking out what we're calling an accelerate team. So we have a very large company with a traditional kind of hierarchical structure, which means that if you're in a more junior role, it's often difficult to get a new idea up to the point where someone can approve it and give you budget to do it. So we've created this team that's broken off from the side, and people had to apply to be part of it, and the team has been selected, and now they will receive some training on how to run brainstorming sessions, how to give presentations. They'll be working with a consultant to pitch all of these new ideas, evaluate which ones could be successful, and then get to bring them to the leadership team within the company as well. So we're trying to do some different things to encourage innovation for more junior employees and help people develop the skills they'll need later in their career as well.
So in a similar vein, you've talked a lot about how as somebody dealing with young people, you can sort of encourage that. I'm wondering what would you like, or how would you like young people working in your company to approach you? Like, what's the least aggressive but the most powerful way that you can be heard? Thanks.
I think this is a great collection of non-aggressive yet powerful women we have here.
So the question is, in what fashion should an idea be presented? Oh, I'm agnostic. You know, I don't care. You know, if you pigeonhole me in the ladies' room, I'm okay. I mean, frankly, I'm smart enough to know how old I am and to know things that are happening that I'm not aware of, and I appreciate somebody cluing me in. I mean, I try to be as knowledgeable as possible, but, you know, talk to me, anybody.
I think one thing you can do if you don't have as many like open people within your company is just ask someone to go out for coffee. Like, most people will be completely willing to do that and take 30 minutes out of their day to talk to you, and then you can start to learn a little bit more about what they do and what they care about, and then slip your ideas in at that point and be a little sneaky.
One of the things I think I heard you guys intimating, and certainly I think Erin got right at it, was the importance of incrementalism. That, like, the evangelical long shot Hail Mary looks cool on the cover of Fast Company, but you don't get there that way. One of the things I struggle with is sometimes I see the Hail Mary and I see where I want to go, and I got to calm myself down a little bit because you've kind of got to break it down to baby steps. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to like when you've got the vision, and how do you like figure out, how am I going to get everyone to just look in that direction before we like run there?
Well, the first thing is you don't try to get everyone. You try to get, you know, the 2 or 3 key people that you need, whether it's the author's editor or it's somebody who can code for you or whatever it is. Pick the smallest number of people and go present the idea to them and say, hey, this seems like a really fun thing that we could do. Are you in? I mean, this is literally what I've done. And then they say, yeah, I'm in. And then you go fashion it. And when you need money, which you obviously will quickly, then you figure out your most empathetic executive or publisher or whomever to get it to the next level. And then you pick up, you know, allies as you go, has been my experience.
Snowballs.
Building Megan's army.
It's snowball. Okay, I don't think that's a technical term. I just, yeah.
So it's like the Wizard of Oz.
I think one of the keys too is if you ask once for someone to look in that direction and they don't look, keep asking.
Right.
If it's something you are really, really interested in, you know, or ask someone else. And if they don't look, ask someone else. Just because someone doesn't pick it up right away doesn't mean it's not valuable, and it doesn't mean you should turn away from it either.
And that's the exciting part about our work, is that we can do that, and everybody should be doing that. Sort of thinking, what am I going to do on the side? And because it gets a little dull, you know, to do everything the same way every single day. No matter what division of the company you're in, or no matter what effort you're making, it's fun to just think up new stuff.
But I think a lot of what we talked about also is just, there is this huge amount of support and education and marketing work that goes along with the innovation you want to do, that the idea is really the smallest part of the innovation. Like, you have the idea, and then you need to bring everyone with you, and that's, you know, even as small as, like, when I learn something, I make sure to share it with my team so that when I want to do an innovation based on that learning, they're all already there with me. And I think the finding allies part is right, that I know who's the one children's designer who's receptive to digital innovation, who's the one editor who's likely to have a project that'll work.
Your people are.